Keeper of the Lost Cities, chapters 48 and 49, the final two chapters. If you made it this far, thank you so much for being here. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already and give this video a like. If you made it all the way this far, leave me a comment and let me know what your favorite part of this book has been. Thanks. Sophie's dreams were a horror show of ghostly voices and black figures and fire. She woke up tangled in the covers, only to find an enormous gray beast towering over her. She screamed as black fear swirled through her mind, and her whole body trembled. "Stop, Sophie," Alden warned, shaking her shoulders. "Stop, you're hurting him." His voice washed the darkness away, and her vision cleared. The gray beast twisted in pain on the floor. "Sandor won't hurt you," Alden promised. "The council assigned you a goblin bodyguard to keep you safe. It's not a good idea to inflict pain on him." Her jaw dropped. "Inflict?" Alden nodded. "It seems you're an inflictor. A melder causes temporary paralysis, so Dex was still semi-conscious during your escape. He told me you made everyone collapse in pain. I wondered if that meant you could inflict. You just did do it to Sandor, so it appears you can." Her eyes widened, and she turned to the barely conscious goblin on the floor. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "He'll be okay in a minute," Alden promised. "Goblins are tough." And yet she'd incapacitated him, without even trying. "But I'm a telepath. How can I have two special abilities?" "It is possible to have more than one. Rare, but considering how special you are, I wouldn't be surprised if you still have more abilities that haven't yet been discovered." "Wait, I'll just wake up and suddenly be able to, walk through walls?" "Not quite. Most abilities stay dormant until they're activated, which is why we have ability detecting. It seems like the trauma of being kidnapped activated some of your latest talents. That's why you can inflict. Why your concentration is stronger now, and Dex said you're a polyglot." "A what?" "You speak languages instinctively, just by hearing them. It's a very rare skill. You'll be glad to have it as you advance in multispecial studies." "I guess." She wasn't sure she would ever be so excited about having more weird talents. "We'll run some tests when you get stronger. See if we can figure out what else you can do." She shivered. She could still hear the ghostly voice of the kidnapper saying something similar when he interrogated her. What if she didn't want to find out anything else? Sandor heaved himself to his feet and moved back to his post in the shadows. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "It's all right." Sandor's soft voice would have made more sense coming from a bunny than a 7-foot-tall, buffed-out goblin. He turned to Sophie and bowed. "It's nice to know my charge can defend herself if I fail her." She shivered. "I take it this means you haven't caught the kidnappers?" Alden squeezed her hands. "We won't let them get anywhere near you ever again. The nobility's working overtime following the leads we have." He handed her a memory log and flipped to the blank pages. "Do you remember anything that might help?" "I was blindfolded the whole time, and I was too drugged to probe their minds. Plus, I was saving my concentration for transmitting. But the leader was a pyrokinetic, so it had to be Finton." "You're sure he was a pyrokinetic?" She rubbed where his hands had seared her skin. "Positive." A deep pucker formed between his brows. "Then we have an unregistered pyrokinetic. We're still monitoring every move of the other pyrokinetics, and it couldn't be Finton." "Why not?" "The sample you collected proves the fires were ever ablaze. Finton was arrested the day you and Dex disappeared, and he's been held in custody ever since, awaiting tribunal." "That actually makes sense. He asked me if I knew who he was, and when I guessed Finton, he laughed. And then he burned me again." Sophie shuddered. "I'm so sorry, Sophie," Alden whispered, choking up. "When I think about what—" "Don't think about it," she interrupted, hating to see him upset. "It's over. I'm fine, and it's not your fault." "In a way, it is. I'm the one who declared your deaths and called off the search. If I hadn't done that, we might have found you sooner." He shook his head. "When they found your pendants in the ocean, and there had clearly been a tidal wave at the cave, I couldn't see how it could be anything other than a tragic accident. I never considered kidnapping. I never thought the Black Swan would sink so low. They didn't." I don't know who the kidnappers were, but they weren't the Black Swan. In fact, I think the Black Swan rescued us. That's what Dex said. Are you sure? She nodded, trying to organize her memories. They were a muddled mess from the drugs. I think the Black Swan are working against the kidnappers, and I think they sent me notes and clues because they wanted me to stop the Everblaze. She paused, not sure if she wanted to know the answer to the next question. Do you think the kidnappers are the ones who started the Everblaze? Alden fiddled with his cloak. It's possible. Finting claims innocence. But he also won't submit to a probe, so he's hiding something. And if we have an unregistered pyrokinetic out there, I have no doubt Fenton knows something about it. Why doesn't the council just order a memory break? They want to give their friend a chance to see the error of his ways, and perhaps this new information will motivate him to confess. If not, they'll order one. They're just trying to avoid condemning him to a life of madness. That's his choice if he won't confess. It is. But if you'd ever seen a memory break, you would understand their reluctance. His shoulders trembled. It's haunting. Her thoughts flashed to Prentice. She didn't know what he looked like, or even who he was, but he let his mind be broken to protect her. Maybe from the same people who'd taken her and Dex. She wasn't sure she deserved that sacrifice, especially since it also destroyed the lives of his family. I'm sure the memory break will be ordered, Alden said, breaking the silence that had settled over them. The council is simply giving their friend every chance to help himself. Plus, they don't want to believe he tried to single-handedly wipe out the human race. In the meantime, if there's anything else you can remember that might help us find the kidnappers, now is the time to tell me. There was something else, something big, but the memory was out of reach, repressed by the trauma. She stared at Alden's hands as he fiddled with his cape, his pale white hands. She lunged for the memory log. I've seen one of them. What? When? The man who tried to grab me in the human world the day Fitz brought me here. He had a dog bite on his hand. The kidnapper had a crescent-shaped scar on the same place. She projected the wound and the scar on the page and handed the memory log to Alden. One was fresh and bleeding, and the other was a faded scar. But they had the same exact size and shape, and were even jagged in the same places. See? He really was an elf, and he had been there to get me. Yet another way I've failed to protect you. Alden shook his head. Do you remember what he looks like? She closed her eyes and concentrated on the memory, waiting until she recalled every detail before she sent it to the paper. Her hands shook as she stared at the person who'd tied her up and drugged her, who'd been ready to kill Dex. He had short, blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, chiseled features. It seemed wrong for someone so handsome to be so evil. Alden's eyes pored over the image. I don't know him. It amazes me he let you go the first time, with only a human to threaten him. Well, Mr. Forkle could be... Could be what? Alden asked, when she didn't continue. Her mind was racing in too many directions to answer. She rubbed her temples, trying to think through the chaos of memories. She needed to be really sure of what she was about to say. Should I call Elwyn? Alden asked, rushing to his feet. She grabbed his cape. It was him. What was? Mr. Forkle. She shook her head as she met Alden's eyes. Mr. Forkle rescued us. The sentence was so bizarre it made her want to laugh. But it was true. Mr. Forkle, Alden repeated. She nodded. He started almost every sentence with you kids. The man who rescued us said that too. That could be a coincidence. It was him. She scooted back like she needed room to fit her huge epiphany. Mr. Forkle is an elf. Alden sank down beside her. You're sure? She wanted to say yes, but she grabbed the memory log and projected Mr. Forkle the way she remembered him. Wrinkled, overweight. There had to be a mistake. Alden gasped as he looked over his shoulder. He is an elf. But he's old? That's exactly what someone looks like when they've eaten ruckleberries. See the way the skin looks stretched? The body swells and wrinkles as the berries digest. He did smell like feet, Sophie remembered. That could have been from the berries. Alden swept his hair back and stared into space. That explains why the kidnappers backed down. He could tell your neighbor was more powerful than him, but I'm sure the Black Swan had their most skilled operative guarding you. He shook his head. I should have guessed they wouldn't have left you alone. They'd want someone nearby in case things went wrong. He was right. Mr. Forkle had always looked out for her. He'd been there to call 911 when she hit her head, and he was always asking about her headaches. He must have known she was a telepath. But why could he hear his thoughts? Shouldn't his mind have been silent? Another part of his disguise. A highly trained telepath can broadcast thoughts the way humans do. He gave you what you needed to hear to not suspect him. I bet that's how they planted some of the memories in your brain. He certainly had enough access to broadcast subliminal messages when he needed to. Mr. Forkle? A telepath? She sucked in a breath. He was there when I fell and hit my head. The accident that started my telepathy when I was 5. Do you think he did something to me? It's possible. I'm not sure why they'd want to trigger an ability in you at that age, but he might have decided to take advantage of you being unconscious. Telepaths can be easier to activate that way. Not that I've ever tried it. In fact, I wonder... What? She asked, when he didn't finish. I wonder if he's the reason you've developed more abilities. He might have triggered some after he rescued you. They were exactly the skills you needed to survive. She didn't remember that much of what happened, but she did remember feeling 5 years old again. Was that because he'd done the same thing he'd done back then? She shook her head. It was too much. Her whole life she'd been controlled and manipulated, and they were still doing it. Why? She asked, wishing she had something to throw. Why put me with humans? Why all the secrets? What was the point? I don't know, Alden whispered as he rose to pace. I'd always assumed it was to hide you from us, but maybe there was more to it than that. Tell me, why did you risk everything to bottle the Everblaze? She was surprised he had to ask. People were dying. Humans were dying, he corrected, and no one cared enough to stop it, except you. I think you can hardly deny your upbringing played a big role in that decision. Maybe that's what the Black Swan wanted all along. If you're right, and they're working against these other rebels who seem to want to destroy the human race, then perhaps they thought it would be wise to have someone who cared about humans on their side. I'm not on their side. That doesn't mean they don't want you to be. He paused to stare out the window. The only ones who will know for sure are the Black Swan. It's time we find them and ask. He made it sound so simple, like he could just look up their address in a phone book. They've been hiding from you for years. What makes you think you can find them now? He held up the memory log. We'll run these images through the registry database. Your neighbor might be hard to find, but we'll check every telepath until we find him and force him to lead us to the Black Swan. In the meantime, we'll use the other picture to find the identity of the kidnapper. Once we catch him, we'll be able to probe his mind to find the others. She curled her knees into her chest, shaking her head. I told him I recognized him. I'm sure he's in hiding now. It's not that easy to hide from us. No offense, but it doesn't seem like it's that hard. The Black Swan hid me for 12 years, and you only found me when they led you to me. The kidnappers hid us somewhere in Paris, and you had no idea. They had secret leaping crystals hidden among humans that no one knew about, except the other rebels. I think it's easier to hide here than in the human cities. At least they have security cameras and detectives and police. Alden sighed. I see why you might feel that way. But you have to understand, Sophie, humans have those measures in place because conspiracies and arson and kidnappings are committed. Those are unheard of here. Or they used to be. He shook his head. For thousands of years, the Council reigned supreme. They were the wisest, most talented members of our society, working together for the greater good. No one questioned their authority. But the past few decades have changed everything. Why? Humans. They've developed weapons powerful enough to destroy the planet. About 60 years ago, a measure was brought before the council to create a new sanctuary, specifically for humans, to relocate them for the good of the earth and their own safety. It had a lot of support. Some very influential people had grown tired of hiding in the shadows while humans run amok through the globe. But the council rejected it, refusing to imprison an intelligent species. For the record, I agreed with their decision. Sophie nodded. Humans would be devastated if their lives were uprooted that way. The supporters of the initiative were angry with the council. Some called for the members to resign, especially Bronte, since he was most outspoken about the idea. And there were threats to go ahead with the plan anyway. The council didn't take the threats seriously, but they forbade human contact to any kind and recruited telepaths like myself to keep our minds open for suspicious activity. All talk of rebellion vanished, and the council was satisfied. Crisis solved. He sighed. I'd always suspected the rebels moved underground, though I never would have guessed there was more than one group. I'm afraid I've been almost as blind as the council. His shoulders sagged as he stared at the ground. Even when I found your DNA, none of the counselors would believe you really existed, or that if you did, that it had anything to do with the rebellion. That's why things have been handled so poorly, but they can't ignore it anymore. An elf tried to burn the forbidden cities to the ground with Everblaze. A team of alchemists had to spend days making frisson to put out the fires all over the globe. 2 children were kidnapped by an unregistered pyrokinetic and held prisoner while we held funerals for them. His voice cracked, and he paused for a second, clearing his throat. The council has been forced to admit the rebellion exists, and you can rest assured that this threat will be resolved. We have tremendous power at our disposal. They just haven't been using it. Sophie reached for Ella, hugging her to her chest to hide her shaking. She wanted to believe him, but it was so hard. The rebels were smart and very well organized. If they wanted to get to her, she had no doubt that they could. But she had a bodyguard now. He would keep her safe, though she wasn't in love with the idea of a giant gray goblin following her around all the time. I can tell you're still worried, Sophie, and I don't blame you, but trust me on this. The rebellion will be stamped out very quickly now that the council is willing to acknowledge it. Anyone involved will be brought to justice. I hope so, she whispered, trying not to think about the ghostly-voiced elf who was out there somewhere, plotting revenge. I'll see if I can trigger any more memories that might help. No, Alden sat beside her. I don't want you involved. You've been a big help, and you have incredible powers at your disposal. But you're 12 years old. 13, she corrected, realizing her birthday had passed a few months ago. Elves didn't pay attention to birthdays, given their indefinite lifespan. So she'd forgotten. Fine. 13. That's still too young to be wrapped up in the conspiracy. I want you to make me a new promise. He waited until she met his eyes. I want you to promise you will just be a normal, happy 13-year-old girl. Go to school, make friends, get crushes on boys, have fun, no more worrying about secret messages or plots or rebellions. Leave that to boring grown-ups like me. But I'm not a normal 13-year-old girl. I have abilities no one understands, and secrets stored in my brain that people are willing to kill me for. That may be true, but being special doesn't mean you can't have a normal life. You only get 7 years to be a teenager. Enjoy them. Promise me you'll try. A normal life. It sounded too good to be true. It was too good to be true. After everything she'd been through, she'd accepted that she would never fully belong. It was time to stop pretending that she could. I'll try, she agreed. Only if you promise me that if something big happens and you need me, you'll come to me, even if I'm only 13. He held her gaze like he was waiting for her to blink. She didn't. You drive a hard bargain, he relented. But deal. Okay, then. I promise. The council will be happy to hear that. It will help your tribunal. Tribunal? His eyes dropped to the floor. Bronte is still insisting a tribunal be held for the laws you broke to collect the Everblaze. Plus, the council has to decide your future at Foxfire. She tugged out an eyelash. She'd forgotten how uncertain her future still was. When will it be? Not right away. We've agreed to wait until you're strong enough. I'm strong enough. 3 days ago you had a banshee at your side, and we were terrified we were going to have to hold a real funeral for you. Please don't make me wait. I can't stand not knowing. Alden studied her face for a long time before responding. If that's what you really want, I'll arrange everything for tomorrow. She nodded. It is. Chapter 49. Sophie sat next to Alden on a pedestal facing the 12 counselors in Tribunal Hall. And this time it was a packed house. Friends, mentors, strangers, even enemies. Stina sneered at her as Bronte rose to read the charges. Between the laws and the bylaws and the sub-laws, she'd committed 5 major transgressions and 11 minor transgressions. A new record. At least half of them carried the possibility of exile. And yet, Sophie wasn't afraid. She'd been drugged and interrogated, watched her best friend tortured for trying to escape, and had to fight her way back from fading away. No matter what the council decided, it could never be worse than what she'd already survived. So her legs didn't shake as she walked up to speak her defense, and she didn't tremble under Bronte's glare. Her curtsy was as ungraceful as ever. She heard Stina snicker as she lost her balance at the end, but she held her head high as she faced the council in all their regal glory. Miss Foster, Emery said, his voice warm, on behalf of our entire council, I'd like to express our relief that you made it home safely. We'd also like to assure you that we will find whoever was responsible for your kidnapping and make them see justice for their actions. Thank you, she said, proud of the strength in her voice. That being said, you stand before us today accused of very serious charges. What do you have to say for your defense? She'd spent all night drafting the perfect apology for her actions, but she'd thrown it all away before leaving Everglen. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done, and she wouldn't pretend otherwise. Orly would know if she was lying anyhow. Sophie cleared her throat and addressed the entire council, even Bronte. I never wanted to break the law, and I don't plan on doing it again. But people were losing their houses. People were dying. I know they were human, but I couldn't sit back and let it happen. I'm sorry if that's a crime. I won't argue if you punish me for my choice, but I firmly believe it was the right decision. I'd rather be punished for making the right decision than live with the guilt of making the wrong one for the rest of my life. Murmurs and whispers filled the room until Emery cleared his throat. Silence fell as he closed his eyes and placed his hands over his temples. Most of the counselors ignored her as they debated, but Tarek glanced her way, shooting the tiniest wink when their eyes met. She hoped it was a good sign, but she couldn't be sure. Emery held out his hands to silence the arguments raging in his head. His eyes locked with Sophie's, his face unreadable. Thank you for your honesty, Miss Foster. While some of us, he glanced at Bronte, feel your attitude is disrespectful and rebellious, none of us can deny that your actions uncovered a problem and conspiracy we ourselves had overlooked, and for that we owe you our gratitude. We can't, however, simply ignore the fact that laws were broken. She sucked in a breath, preparing for the worst as the whispers and murmurs buzzed in her ears like static. There was much debate on what proper punishment would be, Emery continued, with another sidelong glance at Bronte. But a decision has been reached, and it is unanimous. He cleared his throat. Considering the fact that we, as your rulers, failed to protect you from the recent unfortunate experiences, we feel that it would be inappropriate to assign any further punishment. Your transgressions will go on, your permanent record, but your punishment will be marked as already served, and that will be the end of the matter. Is that understood? It took a second for the words to set in, and another after that for her racing mind to realize he expected a response. Yes, Sophie practically sang as the murmurs turned into chatter around her. Punishment already served. Could that really be it? Could it really be over? Which brings us to the matter of your Foxfire admission, Emery shouted over the din, his words like a giant pin bursting the bubble she'd been floating in. The room fell silent. Sophie's heart thundered in her chest. Miss Foster, you were admitted to Foxfire on a provisional basis, and the matter was to be revisited once we'd seen your performance in your sessions. Due, however, to the aforementioned unfortunate experiences, you missed all your final exams and are currently failing all your sessions. And in order to preserve the integrity of our testing process, we cannot allow the exams to be made up at this time. So we're at a bit of a loss as far as how to proceed. Bronte opened his mouth and Emery cut him off. Your suggestion has been noted, Councillor Bronte. We are, however, hoping to hear a few suggestions before we decide. I open this up to Miss Foster's mentors. Can any of you see a solution to her grade issues? Whispers hissed through the auditorium as all of her mentors rose from their front row seats and bowed their respects. If I may offer a suggestion, Tiergan said, smoothing his intricate blue cape as he stood and bowed. He'd dressed up for the occasion. It looked even fancier than Lady Galvin's. Ah, Sir Tiergan, Emery said, his voice with a harder edge. It's been a long time since you've stood before us. Yes, and I hope this time my appeal will be more successful, he murmured. Emery waved his hand, signaling that the floor was his. Tiergan shuffled his feet. Sophie is the most talented telepath I've ever worked with, and I cannot imagine failing her for any reason. If you need proof that her skills hold up under test, well, I can't think of any better proof than the fact that she managed to transmit halfway across the world to Fitz and send a mental image to guide him to her location, all while her body was fading away. For that alone, I'd give her 100% if the council would accept it. Sophie resisted the urge to run across the room and hug him. There was a moment of silence before Emery nodded. We would. But if she were to continue her studies at Foxfire, she would require a mentor, and our records indicate you aren't planning to return. I would be willing to extend my stay as mentor, provided Sophie would remain as my prodigy, Tiergan agreed, looking only at Sophie. She nodded, hoping he knew how much she appreciated his sacrifice. She knew how much he despised being part of the nobility. Excellent. Emery turned to the other mentors. Anyone else have anything to add? Lady Anwen stepped forward. Sophie knows more about the human species than any prodigy I've had, so I'll gladly give her 100% for multispeciesial studies. She was already passing with flying colors. Several of the counselors nodded their agreement. Bronte scowled. The fact that she was able to pull herself back from fading away settles the mind over matter debate quite nicely, Sir Faxon added, and should definitely count for 100% in metaphysics. He bowed, stepping aside to let Lady Dara forward. She dipped an elaborate curtsy. Sophie didn't just learn history, she made history. Textbooks will be written about her someday, and I'll not have them saying she received anything less than 100% in my session. Hope flared in Sophie's heart, but she tried to squash it. She still had her toughest mentors left. She held her breath as Lady Elixine stepped forward. I think the fact that Miss Foster was able to leap an injured friend without a nexus, and both of them survived to tell the tale, is more than enough to earn her 100% on her physical education exam. And she found an unmapped star, Sir Aston added. Not to mention, she has the stars memorized. She definitely deserves 100% in the universe. All the counselors were smiling at this point, except Bronte. He turned his murderous glare on Sir Connolly as he bowed and cleared his throat. Sophie successfully bottled a sample of Everblaze, something I doubt even I could have done. It would be absurd to give her anything less than 100% in elementalism. The room seemed to hold its breath as all eyes turned to Lady Galvin. She stood beside the others, fingering the jewels on her dark purple cape. Anything you would like to add? Emery asked, when she didn't say anything. Lady Galvin cleared her throat. This will not be a popular decision, but Miss Foster barely passed her midterm and has struggled with my session all year. There's no way I can justifiably pass her. Silence throbbed through the room as Emery frowned. Nothing will change your mind? She turned to Sophie as she shook her head. I'm sorry. She sounded like she meant it. The crowd buzzed with murmurs of displeasure, but Sophie could hear Stina's cackle rise above it all. Right then, she would have given anything to be a vanisher and disappear. This is most unfortunate, Emery said through a sigh. He glanced at the other counselors, who were shaking their heads, except Bronte, who was smirking like a spider with a trapped fly. It appears our hands are tied. We cannot allow Miss Foster to advance if she does not qualify for 8 subjects. Perhaps we can agree to let her retake the year? He turned to the other counselors. The room swam around her, and Sophie wobbled on her feet. Being held back was better than exilium for sure, but it would still mean being left behind all of her friends. If I may propose an alternative solution, Alden interrupted, rising with an elegant bow. Sophie held her breath as Emery gestured for him to proceed. The rule states that she must qualify for 8 sessions to advance, not that she must pass 8 sessions. And recent events have revealed that Sophie has developed a second special ability. Alden paused for the murmurs in the crowd to quiet. Obviously, that would qualify her for a training session with her new ability. Therefore, it would seem not only practical but prudent to replace her alchemy session, which she obviously has no future career prospects in. He flashed Sophie a smile. With a session studying inflicting. A rumble of the audience shifted in their seats, mirroring Sophie's internal unease. She had mixed feelings about being able to inflict pain on others at will, but she wasn't sure she wanted to train in it. But if it got her into the next level at Foxfire, it would be worth it. Emery stroked his chin. That would be logical. Absolutely not, Bronte barked, a vein throbbing in his forehead. I refuse. That's not your decision to make, Emery informed him with a smile. An ability as volatile as conflicting qualifies for a majority vote decision, and... He closed his eyes. We have it. 11-1 in favor. That settles it. Miss Foster will continue her studies at Foxfire, and an inflicting session will replace her alchemy session. Someone cheered, Dex or Keefe, Sophie wasn't sure, and the whole audience followed their lead, erupting into applause and chanting her name. So I passed? Sophie asked Alden, shouting over the chaos. I can stay? She wanted to smile when he nodded, but the glare Bronte was directing at her was so hateful it nearly knocked her over. He cleared his throat, silencing the room. You can force me to mentor her in my ability, but my final grade will be up to me, and I can guarantee she will not pass. Angry murmurs rose as Sophie turned to Alden. Bronte's going to be my mentor? She waited for him to tell her it was a mistake, but Alden nodded. Bronte's the only registered inflictor besides you. It's a very rare ability. Her mind reeled with horror. Bronte made Lady Galvin seem cuddly. But he's planning to fail me. We'll deal with that when the time comes. For now, just be glad you've earned another year at Foxfire. She knew he was right, but it was hard to be excited about a year of one-on-one sessions with Bronte, learning how to inflict pain. She didn't even want to imagine how he'd teach something like that. Next year was going to be very interesting. There's one more matter we must address before we close, Emery announced, calling the room back to order. It's a delicate matter, however, and one I think best left only to immediate friends and family. Everyone else, please see yourselves out. He waited until the crowd left, then turned to Sophie. It appears we have 2 adoption requests for you, Miss Foster. One from Alden and Della Vacker, and the other from Grady and Adeline Ruin. The council feels it should be your choice, so we're leaving the decision up to you. Sophie spun around, her eyes finding Grady and Adeline. Grady gave her a small smile. It's your call, Sophie. Whatever you decide, we'll still love you. Adeline nodded her agreement. Her eyes looked misty. Alden squeezed Sophie's hand and she jumped. She'd forgotten he was next to her. Della and I want you to be happy. Wherever you decide to live won't change anything." Sophie nodded and swallowed the tangle of emotions, trying to sort them out. She turned back to Grady and Adeline, taking in Adeline's tear-stained cheeks and dark circles, and Grady's puffy eyes and rigid jaw. She knew what she needed to do, what she wanted to do. "Do you need some time to decide?" Emery asked her. "No, I've made up my mind." She took a deep breath and cleared the emotion out of her voice as she turned to face the council. "I want to stay with Grady and Adeline Ruin." She wasn't sure who cheered louder, Grady and Adeline or Dex. Then she dipped another curtsy as Emery concluded the tribunal and the counselors glittered away. Alden wrapped Sophie in a big bear hug. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered, "and I think you made the right decision." "I think so too," she said, glad he understood. Living with Alden and Della would have been amazing, but Grady and Adeline needed her, and she needed them too. She could never be Jolie, and they could never be the mom and dad she'd lost, but they could still be there for each other. Alden led her outside, where all her friends had gathered under one of the piers. Grady lifted her, twirling her twice before setting her down so Adeline could strangle her with a hug. "You won't regret that decision," Adeline whispered, kissing her cheek. "I promise." "I know I won't," Sophie whispered back. "I love you guys." "We love you too." Grady crushed her with a hug, and when he pulled away, his eyes were wet with tears. Sophie scrubbed her own tears away with the back of her hand. "For the record, I'm really glad they didn't exile you," Dex said, as he gave her an awkward hug. "And I'm really glad you aren't going to be with the Vackers," he whispered in her ear. Sophie rolled her eyes, but her lips still twisted into a smile. Some things never change, and she wasn't sure that was a bad thing. "So, you don't want to live with us?" Fitz teased, nudging her arm. "I see how it is." "I know," Keith agreed. "You saved a girl's life one day, and the next she trades you away like a prattle's pin." Bianca shoved her way between them. She probably couldn't stand the thought of having you guys around all the time, and I can't say I blame her. Sophie giggled. "You guys don't mind?" "Nah, one little sister's more than I can handle already," Fitz said as he sidestepped Bianca's shove. "I guess I'll have to settle for being your friend." "Friends sounds good," Sophie said. Her heart fluttered before their eyes connected, and she backed a few steps away before Keith could notice the change in her mood. Friends was way better than little sister. "You're still staying with us tonight?" Bianca asked. "Actually, I think I want to sleep in my room if it's okay." She glanced at Grady and Adeline. They smiled and nodded. Della pulled Sophie in for a hug. "Just make sure you visit us sometimes." "I will." "You'd better. And, oh, we got you something." Della handed Sophie a small teal box, "to congratulate you for surviving another tribunal." Keith snorted. Leave it to Foster to face multiple tribunals in 9 months. Sophie ignored him as she pulled a black nexus from the box. It was almost identical to the one the kidnappers had stolen from her, except it had tiny swirls of diamonds set into the sides of the runes. "Thank you," she said, fingering the glittering teal jewel in the center. "I know you liked the other one, so I tried to find one close to it, but a little bit more feminine." "I hope it's okay," Della said. "It's perfect. Your concentration is strong enough to not need one, but Elwyn doesn't want you leaping alone until you've given your body some time to recover," Alden explained as he locked the nexus on her wrist. "This one will only unlatch when Elwyn decides you're ready, and uses a special key. And these just came from the registry." He handed her and Dex new registry pendants. They were fancier than their old pendants. Small copper beads framed each side of the crystal, which was now a triangle with 3 facets on each side. And extra cords had been woven into the chain, making it triply thick. "Added security measures," Alden explained, as Adeline swept Sophie's hair back and clasped the choker snug around her neck. Sophie squeezed the pendant, feeling more like herself again. She would always be slightly different, but in her own way, she finally belonged. And with the extra protection, she could almost let go of the worries about the kidnappers. Almost. She reached for Grady and Adeline's hands, feeling safer with someone to hold on to. Not just someone, her family. "You ready to go?" Adeline asked, squeezing her hand tighter. "Yes, I think I am." She took another look at the smiling faces of all her friends. They were safe. She was safe. Everything was going to be okay. Grady tightened his grip on her hand as he held the Pathfinder up to the light. Well, come on then. Let's go home. She nodded, letting the words sink into her heart. They stepped into the path, and a comforting warmth that had nothing to do with the rushing light overwhelmed Sophie. It had been a long and difficult journey, but she finally knew where she belonged. Sophie Foster was going home. That officially concludes Keeper of the Lost Cities, Book 1 by Shanna Messenger. What a work of art. It's been real. It's been great. Thank you for coming along. And I will see you on the next Crazy Keeper adventure.